Imagine being in the place where you should feel the safest, your own home, with your own family. But instead, you're humiliated and disrespected in front of everyone. And worse, the person doing this is the one you love. This is exactly what happened to Sarah. On a night that should have been a celebration, she found herself facing an unimaginable public humiliation. But no one was prepared for what would happen next. A 9-year-old child, with words that paralyzed even the strongest, came to change everything. A story that will stir your emotions and leave you in suspense from start to finish. And the big question is, how did Sarah manage to turn things around? Before continuing, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and hit the bell so you don't miss any details of this incredible story. Get ready to be moved. The Thanksgiving dinner, which should have been a celebration of unity and gratitude, quickly turned into a battlefield. Sarah, trying to maintain her composure, sat at the table, hoping that at least for that day, the tension with David would be set aside. She had worked so hard to make everything perfect, but deep down she knew that David was distant, with a cold, indifferent look. She tried to start a simple conversation about a friend who had achieved a great professional milestone. But before she could even finish her sentence, David interrupted her, his voice full of disdain, attacking her attempt to share something positive. He didn't stop there. Ruthlessly, he began exposing intimate and embarrassing details of Sarah's life. He talked about the crisis she faced years ago when she tried to start her own business and how she'd failed in the face of difficulties. He ridiculed her, reminding everyone how, from time to time, she couldn't keep the house the way he wanted. Every word from David was a blow to her confidence. And as he continued, Sarah's humiliation deepened. At that moment, everyone was silent, but no one dared intervene. Sarah's gaze drifted down to the table, the weight of the shame crushing her. She wanted to scream, defend herself, but David's words paralyzed her. Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get worse, the door opened. And like a small spark in the midst of the darkness, Emma, her 9-year-old daughter, entered the room, holding her tablet in her hands. Emma walked in, unaware of the heavy atmosphere in the room. She looked around, noticing the tension in the air, but her unwavering attitude didn't falter. She was only 9 years old, but in her eyes, there was a determination that defied the gravity of the situation. She was there to do what apparently no adult in the room had the courage to do up until that point: confront David. Without hesitation, she approached him and raised her tablet, displaying the screen to everyone. What was on the screen wasn't just any recording. There were images and videos Sarah could never have imagined would be exposed. Images of violence, where David, in moments of rage, raised his hand against Sarah. Shocking videos, recorded by Emma, who unknowingly documented the abuse her mother had tried to hide from the world. She had captured moments of pure terror. The room fell into complete silence. The words Sarah had feared to say were now exposed, undeniably. The evidence was there, the violence, the manipulation, the abuse. And as everyone watched, a feeling of shock and disbelief overtook them. David, once the controlling figure, was now in total despair, not knowing what to do. Emma, with a determined heart, had exposed everything. The courage of the child was a devastating blow to David's image, and now he was completely unmasked. The impact of the images Emma exposed was overwhelming. David was paralyzed, speechless, staring at the screen, trying to find an excuse for what was being revealed. But the truth was already in front of everyone, raw and unfiltered. And in the midst of that heavy silence, something else was about to happen. The door of the house opened again. Sarah looked toward the entrance and saw a woman she hadn't expected but was there for a very clear reason: Lucia, a figure from David's past who had suffered at his hands, just like Sarah. Lucia, with cold, determined eyes, entered the room with a clear purpose. She wasn't there to be friendly. She was there for revenge. Lucia didn't come empty-handed. She had spent years gathering everything she needed: messages, photos, and recordings that proved what David had tried to hide from everyone for so long. She was there to expose the man who, for years, had destroyed the lives of so many people. Lucia had been a victim of David in the past, but she hadn't settled for living with the pain. She was determined to bring justice. She placed a folder full of documents and photos on the table. Each of those papers was a piece of the destruction puzzle David had created. He couldn't deny it anymore. The weight of guilt was upon him, and no one believed his lies anymore. The war was already lost for David. Lucia knew exactly what she wanted. She wasn't just there to confront David. She was there to end the facade he had maintained for so long. She had tried to speak with him before, at a time when there was still hope that he might change. But now, the woman who once loved that man saw nothing but a monster. And she was determined to bring justice, not only for herself, but for all of David's victims. She looked at David with a calculated, cold gaze and spoke directly. "You won't escape this, David. I have everything I need. There's no turning back for you." Lucia's words were like sharp knives, cutting through any resistance he still tried to put up. And then, she laid the evidence on the table, recordings, photos, conversations that David never imagined would be uncovered. She knew that, with this, there was no doubt left. David had lost his last chance. Lucia was ready to hand everything over to the authorities. She knew the consequences for him would be severe, but more importantly, she knew that this time, he wouldn't escape unscathed. Justice was on its way. The noose was tightening. David, once so sure of himself, was now desperate. He tried to argue, deny everything, but there was no more hiding his mistakes. And it was at that moment that the final piece of the puzzle was put into place. A friend of David's, someone he considered an ally, decided to do what was right. After years of silence, he finally handed over a crucial recording. In that recording, David admitted his actions. He confessed to his violence, his betrayal, his lies. The confession was the last key to ensure that David would be held accountable for his crimes. There was no more doubt about his guilt. With that, justice began to be served. David was formally charged and faced a legal process that led to his conviction. It wasn't just a personal defeat. It was a victory for Sarah, for Emma, for Lucia, and for everyone who had been seeking the truth. The trial was ruthless. The evidence was clear, and there was no room for appeals. David, now stripped of his lies and manipulations, found himself completely unmasked. He was convicted, and the authorities took the necessary steps to ensure he paid for what he had done. Sarah and Emma, now free from David's control, began to rebuild their lives. The pain of the humiliation still lingered, but justice had been served. And over time, they learned to live without fear. David would now face the consequences the law had in store for him. He had destroyed so many lives, but now it was time to pay for his crimes. Sarah found the strength to rise again, but it was Emma who became the hero of this story. Not only to protect her mother, but to bring true justice. What seemed like an irreversible humiliation turned into an impressive victory. For David, there is no escape. True justice always arrives, even in ways you can't imagine. And for those watching, if you suffer abuse or know someone who does, seek help. Report it. Justice can always be achieved. If you or someone you know is in an abusive situation, remember, you are not alone. Don't hesitate to seek help.